Welcome back on the Lobo Coaches Show. It's time for our I Associates of New Mexico look behind the scenes. The coach, Bob Davey, and I will talk about the great one, the future Hall of Famer in the National Football League, and of course the Lobo All-American, one of the greatest Lobos of all time, Brian Urlacher. An incredible career for Urlacher at the University of New Mexico, Coach Davey, and I mean, you could put this on as coach's tape, couldn't you?
I'll tell you what, it's back when they wore those real big shoulder pads. You notice how big those shoulder pads are. But yeah, just an incredible guy. You know, the fact of where he came from, how he got to the University of New Mexico. And I've said this many times, before I knew a whole lot about the University of New Mexico, I knew that Brian Urlacher played here. He's a guy that even throughout the NFL, everyone knew he came from New Mexico. It was a great story. And I think if you couldn't put a price tag on that kind of advertisement for a university that Brian Urlacher has provided.
A kid from Lovington, New Mexico, is going to be enshrined in Canton one day. And we talked about this, Coach Davey, Dakota Cox. There's a guy that lists as his favorite player, that talks about Brian Urlacher as a guy that he tries to emulate. You know, that's his idol as a football player, your freshman linebacker. And you know, there's a guy from Salt Lake City, just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, who knows of the University of New Mexico because of this one guy who wore number 44, who's going to have his jersey retired.
Yeah, and that's my point. And you know, something we're going to do is also retire his locker. We're going to glass enclose a locker in our locker room. You know, put his jersey in there, put his helmet in there, put his nameplate over top of it, as we are the other three players that have had their numbers retired. You know, just so our players walk in every day and see that. But what a unique guy, you know, playing wide receiver, played some safety, I think returned some punts. You know, a guy that could really run, that continued to get bigger and ended up being a true middle linebacker in the NFL.
Yeah, and he's kind of the guy that played that position, that Lobo backer position for the Lobos, that he made famous. And when you think about it, there's an example for the program moving forward for the type of player that you're trying to recruit here to the University of New Mexico.
Well, I think particularly now the way the game has spread out, you need that kind of hybrid defensive back linebacker. But the one thing you see in all these clips, he will hit you. He will hit you. And then that's the number one thing, is that he could square up and tackle.
So the jersey number will be retired, the Lobo great, on Friday night this week coming up. The Lobos will play the Air Force Academy on a rare Friday night at Branchfield University Stadium, and the Lobos are going to honor him by retiring the number 44. You mentioned that Brett Bowers, who's been wearing it this season, has a little bit of the same sort of mentality that you see from Urlacher.
Yeah, but I think, you know, I don't know Brian well, but you know, Brett Bowers is a guy that loves football. Now, I don't think Brett could go back there and return those punts like that. But it's interesting, there's a lot of Air Force clips on this tape. You know, maybe Brian can help us out Friday night stopping that triple option.
You'd like to have him running around, flying, and make plays against the Falcons. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? All right, our I Associates of New Mexico look behind the scenes is Brian Urlacher, the former Lobo All-American and Lobo great. Great to see him on Friday this week coming up as the Lobos take on the Air Force Academy.